A family of 4 disappears in the middle of Death Valley, their van abandoned miles off-road. Hikers come across a severed hand in Yosemite, later linked to a woman who vanished after getting involved with a cult, but the killer's identity is still a mystery. And the Grand Canyon is a beautiful tourist spot, but human remains are discovered there all the time. These are disturbing discoveries made in national parks that terrified experts. In 1996, a family of 4 from Germany, Eckhard Rimkus, his young son George, girlfriend Cornelia Mayer, and her son Max, set out on a vacation that would take them through Southern California, Las Vegas, and eventually Death Valley National Park. On July 23rd, they vanished without a trace. Their green Plymouth Voyager was eventually found months later in a remote part of the park, way off any normal tourist route. The tires were flat, and it had clearly been driven over extremely rough terrain. Inside were toys, supplies like a tent, a brand new sleeping bag. There was also a beer bottle under a bush about a mile from the van, next to what looked like a shady resting spot. The mystery wasn't solved until 2009, when 2 off-duty search and rescue guys, Les Walker and Tom Mahood, found skeletons of 2 adults along with personal belongings like a passport and journal. The remains of the children were never found. Most believe the family tried a shortcut through rough terrain to reach Yosemite, got stranded, and then tried to hike out for help. Did a woman named Patricia Hicks die at the hands of a serial killer, a cult leader, or something else entirely? Back in 1983, a family hiking through Summit Meadow in Yosemite came across something no one ever wants to find: a human hand and part of a forearm. Rangers searched the area, but they came up empty. 5 years later, though, a skull missing the jawbone turned up nearby. But they still had no idea who this person was or what had happened. For decades, she was known only as the Summit Meadow Jane Doe. But just recently, DNA testing finally put a name to the remains: Patricia Hicks. She'd grown up in Washington, had a bit of a rough past, and eventually ended up in California, where she got involved with a cult-like group led by a guy named Donald Eugene Gibson. He was later convicted of some very serious crimes, then skipped town before he could be sentenced. He was never found. Right around that time, Patricia caught a bus to Yosemite and was never seen again. Investigators believe she might have been trying to start over or escape something, but what happened to her out there? Well, it's still a mystery. Yosemite National Park was the setting for one of the creepiest true crime cases in the late 90s. A guy named Cary Stayner worked at a motel right outside the park. He seemed quiet, kept to himself, had no criminal record at the time, but in 1999, 3 women, Carol Sund, her daughter Julie, and their friend Silvina Peloso, went missing while visiting Yosemite. At first, there wasn't much to go on, but then their rental car was found burned, with 2 bodies inside. Turns out Cary Stayner had lured them in and killed them, after subjecting them to things I can't discuss here on YouTube. And a few months later, he killed a park naturalist named Joy Armstrong, and that's when the FBI finally caught up with him. He's also suspected of taking the lives of 4 other people, but his confirmed deaths were enough to land him a death sentence in 2002. He's still waiting on death row, though. Odd thing about this case is Cary's backstory, too. His younger brother, Steven Stayner, had been kidnapped as a kid and escaped years later. His story even got turned into a TV movie. So yeah, his family had already been through a lot before Cary's crimes came to light. The Grand Canyon is, of course, massive, beautiful, full of tourists and hikers, but it's also kind of a magnet for people disappearing or turning up dead. Park rangers come across bodies way more often than you'd think. One of the most unsettling finds happened back in 2014 when they discovered human remains wedged into a remote part of the canyon. There was no ID, no obvious sign of trauma, just bones. And over the years, multiple sets of remains have been found scattered around the park, usually hikers who find them completely by accident. Some of these people had been missing for years, and no one had a clue where they went. The crazy part is that even with modern forensics, some of these folks still haven't been identified. Some fell, some may have gotten lost and died from exposure, and others, well, no one really knows. One guy's body was found 11 years after he disappeared, just lying in a ravine. So really makes you realize how massive and unforgiving this place can be. From Reddit user Anna Salmon comes the story of the ghost on the water. She writes, I had a paranormal encounter when I was camping with a few friends in Okanagan Falls, British Columbia, Canada. We were camping to celebrate my 13th birthday, and the girls and I had walked down to the lake for a swim. On the walk back to our campground, we walked along a river that had a fair-sized dam. Unfortunately, there had been an accident where two brothers drowned after being unable to escape the turbines a few years earlier. The dam had been marked with a skull and crossbones, and large signs saying danger. We were a couple hundred meters down the river and close to our campground when I saw an incredibly clear and bright white figure of a portly preteen boy walking atop the water. I stopped, I told my friends to look, and one of them did and exclaimed she saw him too. The other covered her face and said she was too scared to look. We watched him for a few minutes until he just faded away. He walked along the river's surface slowly for about 10 meters and then disappeared. It is still the most incredible supernatural encounter I've ever had. Sheila Kearns had just landed a job working at the iconic Paradise Inn in Mount Rainier National Park. She was 43 and by all accounts, doing a great job. In fact, she was doing so well, they asked her to stick around for the winter, which is a big deal considering how harsh those winters can get. The last time anyone saw her was October 4th, 1996, at a staff bonfire that marked the end of the summer season. She was excited about staying on. A few days later, though, she was gone. On October 6th, she didn't show up for work. People checked her room and found all her stuff, but no Sheila. The park launched a search, thinking maybe she got lost hiking a trail. Not a piece of clothing, not even a footprint though. Then the snow came in and shut everything down. It was May of 1997 that a volunteer setting up a training course found skeletal remains scattered near a campground, about a mile from where Sheila worked, and it was her. To this day, her death is still a mystery. And now deleted Reddit user wrote about a horrifying experience they had when they were young. It goes as follows. When I was 8 or 9, my mom took me to a reservoir that I think was near a national park. She made baskets and things from natural materials and I went along to help collect. I wandered off a little and I was picking up trash and things in a bag and a basket. I saw what I thought was a discarded glove on the lake shore and went to pick it up so I could put it in my bag. And well, it wasn't a glove. It was someone's left hand from about a few inches from the wrist into the arm. The person had been in the water for a few days, and I picked up their severed hand. I started screaming, and I guess my hands were clenched onto the dead hand. My mom came running and had to pry my hands open just to drop it. We went to the closest gas station to call the cops. This was the early to mid-90s, pre-cell phones. From what I learned later, there had been a group of inebriated teenagers with a powerboat, and one had fallen in or something and gotten hit by the boat. I found that chunk of him. They tried to convince me at the time that it was a bear paw. I didn't talk for about 2 months, and I still have problems with recently dead things. By the way, I think we should all have problems with recently dead things. I don't think that should ever become, mundane, but anyway, I know what she means. Back in April of 2023, 25-year-old Tremel Evans set out on a solo 5-night backpacking trip through Joshua Tree National Park. He had it all mapped out, starting from the Black Rock campground, hitting at Geology Tour Road, then looping back via the California Riding and Hiking Trail. He was supposed to get picked up on May 5th, but when he didn't show up, he was reported missing. Nothing turned up for over 8 months. Then in late January of 2024, park staff came across a backpack near one of the trails in the Black Rock area. That backpack turned out to be Tremel's, and not far from it, they found skeletal remains. The Riverside County coroner hasn't officially confirmed the identity or cause of death yet, but Tremel's family is convinced that it's him. Whether it was dehydration, a fall, or something else entirely, no one knows yet. While working on a remote trail project about 26 miles from the nearest trailhead, a Reddit user and their 2-person crew were cutting a new path through rugged terrain. Mid-morning, the Redditor stepped away from the group to use the bathroom. and suddenly heard someone whistling nearby. Assuming it was one of his crew, he shouted out and the whistling stopped. It was quiet for a bit, but then it resumed and moved further downhill. That's when he saw two strange men walking below. The men were dressed in full black suits and were wearing top hats, casually strolling through the woods with canes. They didn't have any supplies, no water, they weren't even using a trail, they were just walking through the trees. Startled, the Redditor rushed back to the crew and described what he saw. The three of them returned to the spot just in time to catch a glimpse of the suited men disappearing between the trees. One of the crew members shouted real loud and waved, but the men completely ignored them and just kept walking. None of them really slept well that night. They finished the trail early the next morning and booked it back to civilization, still kinda creeped out. Alright, so this one's an old school ghost story that's stuck around for decades. The Headless Bride of Yellowstone's Old Faithful Inn. The story goes that back in the early 1900s, a young woman from a wealthy family eloped with a man her parents didn't really approve of. They ended up honeymooning at the inn, but supposedly the guy turned out to be violent. And one night, guests and staff heard screams coming from their room. When they checked it out, they found the bride was dead, and her head was gone. It was never found. The husband, of course, was nowhere to be seen. After that, people claimed to see her ghost wandering the halls in her wedding dress without a head. Some say she floats down the staircase late at night. Others have seen her in room 127, which is supposedly where all this happened. Rangers have passed the story down for years, and guests still talk about it. Whether this is real or just creepy folklore, the Old Faithful Inn has earned a pretty creepy reputation, and honestly, even just looking at the place on its own, it's really not that surprising. I mean, it's lovely, sure. Looking at it does have a certain ominous look about it too, though. All that said, I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.